Hi guys, welcome to Fascinating by Fungi Live. Today we're going to be speaking with Rachel Zoller, or Yellow Eleanor, one of my OG mushroom inspirations. She does incredible educational mushroom content here on Instagram, also on YouTube, and she was, when I was first getting started, she was one of the biggest inspirations to me. I'm constantly learning from Rachel. We've hung out in person. I've met her kids. She's just an absolute joy to go mushroom hunting with and really fun to talk to. So we actually, ages ago, Rachel and I did the very first live event I've ever done on any social media. But unfortunately, back in those days, Instagram didn't let you save the live events. So, only like 20 people saw us chat. And now we have the opportunity to have a conversation. I haven't seen her about a little over a year, but, as always, Rachel and I can pick up where we left off. So I'm super excited to get her on the call here and have a great conversation about mushrooms. I think we're going to sort of talk some about educational stuff. We're going to go into the role that women have played in oral traditions and especially passing on foraging knowledge. And it should be a good one. So I'm just waiting for Rachel to join here. There she is. I'm going to send her an invite. But yeah, Rachel's got, like I said, Instagram, YouTube. She's an amazing website. You can find her, Yellow Eleanor. Just search it. She's got an Etsy. She's lots of really cool designs. Oh, hey, Rachel.
Hi.
How you doing?
Pretty good. I'm actually really nervous, so be
Ah,
nice.
okay. I promise I won't bite.
Okay,
Um,
thanks.
well, hi. It's good. It's good to see you. I was just telling people it's been well over a year since I saw you
Mm-hmm.
in person. Was
Mm-hmm.
probably up in Oregon.
Yep.
Um, but how you been? Life's been interesting, huh?
Yeah, if anyone follows me on social media, I'm sometimes an open book. So, the last little while has been chaotic, but
Yeah.
doing pretty good right now. I feel like I
Good.
finally landed on a place where I can get creative again because some of my
Good.
creativity was put to the side just because of stressors of life. So I'm
Yes.
excited
Yes.
about that change.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, certainly, for a while it seemed like you were sort of the puzzle piece roaming around trying to find where you belonged, and now
Yeah.
you guys have a spot, and
Hmm.
important to point out, Rachel's a mom, has two kids,
Hmm.
and that is priority in life. And I think it's
Hmm.
it's easy to look at social media and say, oh, this person does all their time with this mushroom thing and something like that. And you're like, no, no, everyone on here is a real person. We all have like real person responsibilities and things going on.
Yes.
So yeah, good. I'm glad to hear that.
Hmm.
I wanted to ask you about something. So recently you did sort of an artist in residence program
Hmm.
somewhere. That
Yes,
looks
I did.
really cool. Will you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah. So, I I didn't know what an artist in residence thing was until 2 years ago. There was someone who was doing an artist in resident program out of Central Oregon at a place called Subtle Lodge. And he contacted me because he was doing research for a book and wanted to talk about mushrooms in one of the chapters. So he contacted me and we got in touch and he explained what this whole program was. So that's how I found out about it in the first place. So I applied for it. And basically, what it is it's various places do this, art places, lodging places, and whatnot. And it's just providing a space for artists to go get away from everything else and just focus on either a single project that maybe they're wrapping up or starting a new project or just having creative space. So, like, not working on other side things, not bringing your kids,
Yes.
um, and just being there to work. And there's really was really beautiful about it at the Subtle Lodge that I went to is there's like no obligation to go and like mingle a bunch with other people that are staying there. You're not there with other artists either. Every artist has their designated few weeks. You stay, you are by yourself. It's like absolute solitude if you want it to be, and just work on whatever creative project you feel like you want to do, which was really amazing for me because there are things that I've dabbled in or have had interest in, but I haven't been able to dedicate time. Again, that creativity can't come into play when you're worried about like housing, like I was for a
Yep.
lot of this
Yep.
year and such. And so it was really great. It was a really good experience. I started doing some watercolor illustrations just for my education stuff. I really love to write, and so was writing, working on my book. But I also really love poetry, and so I was able to do like focus a little bit on that. And I actually that is something I've wanted to do the last few years, but never really have. Is just kind of cross mingle the education with the poetry side of things, because it would
Oh,
be a totally fun way to like
yeah.
learn and teach people about mushrooms, right? Like,
Yeah. Yeah, I mean
so
not all
yeah.
mushroom media has to be straight educational, and
Right.
not all art has to be just art. You can commingle the two, and mix,
Hmm.
mixed mushroom media is probably my
Yes.
favorite thing. So
Yes.
that sounds fantastic.
Uh-huh.
Mixing prose in with your poetry and all the things. So,
Hmm. Yeah.
so one of the things I saw you doing there was really focusing in on what I think you were calling the fundamentals, which is just
Yes.
kudos to you. That's a great pun.
I have to say my partner came up with that. All
Okay,
of the
well,
funny puns that I have are all him. I literally called him up actually just the other day and I was like, okay, think of something for me. It has to do with, and I just explained the scenario and he's like, got it. Like the
got it.
cheesiest, greatest, wonderful puns. So fundamentals was all him, the fundamentals of fungi. So yes,
Okay,
go
well
ahead.
that's good. That it is always important to pay credit where credit is due. Hey,
Yes.
quick question: have you or do you watch Bob's Burgers on any show on any regular
No.
basis? Because so I saw it back in the day, and I was like, it's a funny TV show. But we've been going back and watching through like all the seasons, and it
Uh-huh.
is one of the punniest shows on TV, just in the sense. And they're subtle because they're not always like in your face, but the beginning of every episode there's always two puns, and then on like their burger board they always have like puns of the day kind of thing. So if you want like access to great, especially burger puns, Bob's
Okay.
Burger is a good one. But anyhow, so you did the Fundamental series, and I think that
Mm-hmm.
was really great because everyone was always, and we talked about this before,
Mm-hmm.
but like everyone was always asking me, Gordon, I want you to do like, mushrooms 101 and do these like really simple things. And I'm like, I'm not super motivated to do the 101 stuff because like you can just Google it. But some people really want to hear it from somebody and kind of get it straight from
Mm-hmm.
the mushroom person's mouth, whatever that is.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you are probably the best person to do that because I always
Thank
turn when
you.
people ask me that, I'm like, go watch Rachel's video. She's like way more patient and better at teaching this stuff than I would be because I'll just, you know. So
And
yeah,
yeah,
your fundamental series. You want to talk about that, like what your goals
sure.
were, just like how
Yeah.
you laid it out.
Yeah, so I think for me, one reason it was important to do that, and again, it was actually, this is the same vein of why I started my YouTube channel. I started my YouTube channel many years ago. I did a season, then I started having kids, and I was like, oh, forget this. So I started back up again last year. So there's like a gap. But with the YouTube and then also with this fundamental series on Instagram, it really has to do with like creating resources that I wish existed when I started mushroom
Mm,
foraging.
mhm.
Because I would never grew up in a family that was really into mushrooms. I didn't have friends who were into mushrooms. It was kind of like this solo endeavor. And even though I'd gone to school and I was like in healthcare, so I had like some background in some, kind of sciencey stuff, but nothing in the world of mushrooms or
Yeah.
mycology.
Well, because there is
Right.
you can go to school for ages, and there are
There's
no
nothing.
classes on mycology and much.
Yeah.
People always ask me like, oh, did you get your degree in mycology? What class did you take? And I'm just like, I
Like,
didn't learn anything about mushrooms in school, not once.
yeah.
There is a class at Davis which I regret not taking, but
Oh,
I
really?
became the mushroom expert without ever having taken a single official class. And same for
Yeah,
you, right? Like,
exactly.
you
And so
know.
for me, I was like, even a field guide was like a little bit too much because I'm
Mm,
like,
hmm.
gosh, Annulus and Peleus, what the heck? Like, why can't
Well,
I just call it like a stem and a cap? Like,
yeah.
why can't I do that? And like I so appreciate the more detailed and scientific terminology now because I realize in a single word you're capturing a few sentences, right? So it is really good once you get there. But when you're starting out, like to use common language is so important. So that's really where the fundamentals came from.
Hmm.
And just something people ask me again, just like they ask you all the time, is like, how do I get started? Like,
Yes. Yeah.
and there's like so many like times I've answered that question, and I just want to have as many resources as I can. And I truly believe one of the best ways, if you want to be someone who's just identifying for the sake of knowing what it's called or identifying to eat something, learning the anatomy of the mushroom, if you do that first before anything else, just get to know its anatomy,
Hmm.
everything else falls into place. It
Right.
really does. Like, I mean, I've taught classes for years now and bringing people out into the woods, and I've taught people who have maybe grown up foraging like morels, because that's really common, right? But
Hmm.
they don't
Hmm.
understand even the anatomy of that mushroom that they've been foraging forever because they've only compared it to itself, right? So if you learn the anatomy of a mushroom and then you can just apply it to everything else, then in the terminology will just eventually like kind of catch up with that. There's still things people say to me, I have no idea what they're talking about. I listen to you and half the time I'm like, oh, that's a word I need to look up. So
But I mean, that's a great point. Is simply just recognizing sort of the shape and potentially
mm-hmm.
function almost of the mushroom
Yes. Yep.
immediately helps you identify. You know, you can if you can
Mm-hmm.
zoom in, like clearly everyone can recognize a cap and a stem and say, okay, that's a
Right.
guild
Right.
mushroom. But just being able to say, here, that's a guild mushroom, you can X out a huge majority of the other stuff you'd look at, and then like
Mm-hmm.
go in very quickly. And if you don't have a guild
Mm-hmm.
mushroom, there's not that many other things that look not like a
Yes.
guild mushroom, so you
Yes.
can quickly be like, oh, that's a polypore, that's a
If you can
gastroid, that's a
eliminate just like one of the big major things, it's amazing how much it like narrows down. You're like, oh,
right.
this is something actually really useful information, even though it seemed like it wasn't important at first. Yeah,
And then I mean,
definitely.
within that, there's huge amounts of nuance and complexity, and like, I even you and I are people would probably refer to us as being international mushroom experts, and I think you and I could both be the first people to admit that like the more we learn, the less we feel
That's
like
so
we
scary
actually
to me.
know
I don't want to be
anything.
called that.
But I'm joking simply in the sense that like most people could hand us a mushroom, we'd probably be like, yeah, I have a general idea what that is. I can see be like it's a russula or it's a this,
Right. You
it's a
can
that.
find the family.
Um,
I think that's so important. And just being able to see the characteristics. Like, I have an idea, at
Yeah.
least. I don't know
And that's
exactly
and
what
that's
it is.
that's what the fundamentals is all about, right? It's
It
sort of
is,
just being able
right.
to put things into categorization or into place, so you can
Yes.
like have make some sense of the world without getting too carried away by the details. Because we're not
Right.
doing sequencing.
Mm-mm.
I don't voucher samples. I should do microscopy. There's a lot of things I feel like I could and should do as a citizen scientist because I have the tools and the time and the resources. But when I think about it, it just gives me anxiety because I'm like that feels like work. I did bench science and microscopy and stuff for
Mm-hmm.
years and molecular stuff
Mm-hmm.
for years, but I'm like that felt like work. I don't want to do that
Mm.
at home. I'm happy to just like take pictures and like forage for things, eat things, and smell things and touch things. And I mean that
Smell
again,
things. There you go.
yeah.
Smell your mushrooms, people. I think I'm known for saying that, so I just had to interject. Smell your
No, absolutely.
mushrooms.
I mean I guess that's what I wanted to get at too is like that tactile experience of being
Uh-huh.
outside, being in the woods with a mushroom is so
Mm-hmm.
different than sitting at home poring over books or googling on the
Mm-hmm.
internet. You're like having something in front of you in your hands that you can smell, touch, feel,
Mm-hmm.
taste if you want. Don't eat them raw, but you can taste a lot of
Yes.
mushrooms. I
Mm-hmm.
don't do that, but there's some people who really like that. That talk about a little bit about that experience of being there with it, in person. What can you
Yeah.
do with that mushroom when you're
Gosh.
trying to
Oh my
explore those
gosh.
fundamentals?
The fundamentals. Well, exactly. If you go out equipped with understanding you don't have to understand the in-depth anatomy, the basic anatomy of a mushroom, then you can go out with an eye for curiosity. Just be like, does it have gills, like you mentioned, or does it have a skirt? And then you just start to realize as you pick up specimens, how much like the feel in your hand makes a difference. Is it slippery feeling, the weight of it,
Hmm.
the weight of it
Hmm.
in your hand, and then again the scent of a mushroom. Smell your mushrooms all the time. 90% of the time it's going to smell like mushrooms and dirt, right? But your nose is
Yeah.
going to get used to that, and then when you smell these other things, it's going to all of a sudden be like, oh, root beer, what? Like black licorice, just things that you wouldn't expect. And so, like for me, I feel there were years where I didn't know the names of certain mushrooms, but I recognized them fully. Like this, I've seen this, and I recognize it. There's one mushroom. It was this blue mushroom, and it was one of the first posts I ever put on Instagram on like some random blue mushroom. It was like the title or something like that. And for years, I would see this mushroom, and there it is again. Oh, there it is again. I just never took the time necessarily to deep dive into what it might be. But that happens with a lot of mushrooms, and you get familiar with them in a way that where if something new comes up, you like even recognize that. You don't have to know the names of everything to all of a
Right.
sudden realize, well, I've actually never seen this one before. What's different about that? Which I do know the name of that blue mushroom now. So,
What
yes.
what was it?
It's one of the Hidnellum species.
Oh, okay.
So
Oh, it was
I,
the like the bleeding tooth, like
yep,
blue, cutesy
exactly,
Hydnellums. Did it have
exactly.
gotation, or was it just kind of that like that
No, it
light
was
blue
when it
one?
was in its like velvety stage, and so it looked like this blobby blue velvety thing.
Still pretty cool.
And yeah, it's definitely cool. And I was like, this thing is weird. And then I don't know why I didn't take the time to ID. It's actually quite easy to ID because it has spines on the underside,
Right.
and not a lot of mushrooms have that. But
Which is
anyways,
a good reminder that
hmm
sometimes if you see something, you're like, whoa, what is that? Like I get a lot of photos from people where they're taking a photo and it's just top down on the mushroom,
oh my gosh,
which
yes.
is to me, it is the most human
Oh,
interpretation of a mushroom, right?
hmm
Is to stand over it and take a picture
hmm
down and be like, what is this? And
yep.
I'm always trying to get people to rephrase, be like, what if I thought like a mushroom instead of a human? And if you're thinking like a mushroom or you're thinking like a fungus, you have to recognize where you are. It's contextual. You're here in the
hmm
forest. Are you on wood? Are you in leaf litter? Are you
hmm
growing on on a tree? Or what are you growing near? What tree types are you with? Is it in moss? Like there's so many little things. And then once you sort of sink down to the level of mushroom, you're able to see so much more than just the top of the cap. You can
hmm
suddenly see, is there gills? Are there teeth?
Yep.
Are there little pores? If you dig it up by the base, can you see the color of the mycelium? If you split the flesh,
Yes. Don't
is
use
it
your
yeah,
knife at first.
yeah, is it solid? Is it stringy? Yeah, and then like, does it have
Hmm
smells and taste? There's you can just run down this entire checklist of stuff that if you have no idea what it is, you can still write down an entire list of all
Yes.
these different sort of
Yep.
sensory perceptions, and
hmm
that's one of those things I love about taking people out and getting them into mushrooms because again,
hmm
most people are pretty scared to touch mushrooms,
It's true.
and that's a shame because I think usually when you're a kid, and I don't blame anyone for this, but they say, oh my God, there's poisonous mushrooms. I don't know
hmm
what they are, so I'm just
hmm
going to tell my 5-year-old to touch no, don't touch any mushrooms. They're all bad for you,
or you're taught to step on them.
or destroy them. You know,
Yeah.
get rid of them, kind of thing. And all of
hmm
that is a real shame because I feel like that is a lackadaisical, whatever. It's a
Yep, that's
lazy
a
way
word. It's a
of
good word.
parenting. Yeah, and it's just it's like your ignorance is not a reason to teach people to hate something, which is a good
hmm
lesson for all of life, right? Don't let
hmm
ignorance get in the way of accepting and understanding other
hmm
people, other things. But particularly
hmm
mushrooms is one that we have this incredibly mycophobic
Yeah.
society.
Oh
And
yeah.
like you as a mom, I've seen you out with your kids, and your kids are like better mushroom hunters than most adults in this
They're
country.
so good.
They are so good. But
Yes, and
like, you
they're
know,
always so
what yeah,
proud
what
if
have
like
you
I
done to
don't
help
see a
teach?
mushroom and they see it first. Like,
That's a good feeling.
Mom,
Yeah,
right?
how did you teach them to like love foraging? And some of it comes naturally, right? But it
Yeah, so I mean, they were a little bit born into it, so I was out doing it constantly and they were doing it too. But there were some things that, like some key things that really stood out to me as I was learning. My oldest, he is 7 now, and when he was probably about 2 years old, there were a couple instances where I just recognized how much he was copying what I was doing. Like he loved mushrooms and everything. Someone just knocked on my door, and I don't know who it is. I'm just gonna ignore it.
okay.
Sorry.
Probably a postman just dropping off a package or
Oh,
something.
that could be.
Hopefully.
We'll just say that.
If they keep knocking, feel free to take a minute here. I can fill
Okay.
the void, but
Anyhow, where kids just like mimic what they see. And so of course, like he was getting excited about finding mushrooms because I would get so proud of him, like, oh yes, you're finding mushrooms and picking them up. And but the moment for me that really there are two things. Is one is I was on a hike with my sister and her kids. They're about the same age. And my son, he kept stopping on the side of the trail and then like squatting down and brushing his hands across the dirt. And
mm-hmm.
I was like, what is he doing? What is he doing? That's so weird. And my sister's like, he's being you. That's you. You stop and you go and you're like, ooh, what's in there? Where's the mushrooms? I'm like, oh my gosh, that's exactly how I operate. He's doing that. And then shortly after that, we were out collecting mushrooms, and he'd pick them up and he'd start smelling them like like really aggressively, like, oh my gosh, it was so cute. But I had never told him to smell his mushrooms. He was doing what I did. And so it's like, okay, so I have to have some intentionality in a few things. For example, you mentioned tasting mushrooms. I
Mm-hmm.
knew right then I could not do any like little nibble taste with him present, like just not in front of him at all, because you can't have like a 2 or 3 year old doing that responsibly. You can't even hardly have adults doing that
Yeah.
responsibly
Yeah.
sometimes. So I just had to be really intentional, and also just started just making sure I was asking him questions when he picked it up. And almost consistently, my kids, my youngest now, he is 4. He especially does this right now. He's really into it, where he'll pick up a mushroom and he goes, what does it have? And he'll flip it over and look, does it have gills or does it have pores? And then the next question usually is, what does it do? And he'll break it apart to see, does it milk or does it change colors? It's just so like, it's that curiosity. It's so natural for them to do it. And so they're really great. And I wonder, like, when will the day come they'll be so annoyed that mom's dragging them out to go mushroom foraging again. But I know at this point it's something that it's a skill set that they have, that they'll be able to carry it out. And we're always like, if you pick a mushroom and we're not going to keep it, because you do have to be careful, kids will just put random stuff in their baskets, and usually their baskets are for random stuff, and that's okay. But if you're not going to keep it, I'm always asking them, or they just know now, I don't have to ask them anymore, when they have to put the mushroom back or like toss it off into the woods somewhere, and they'll usually say, thanks, mushroom, for playing. Just again to have like that intentionality of like, we're not just gonna like rip up everything, because kids would do that. They're just so excited. But, those are
even adults do that when they're first out there, and they just see a newbie's basket and it's got everything you've seen, and you're like, oh, bro, like I left those. Don't pick those up. No, I love that, because it's so true. Kids will. It's not about teaching them, it's simply about what you do, because they will look, they will copy. And again, I think that gets it, like, if adults are mycophobic, if adults have been told to never touch it or somehow fear this little mushroom on the lawn or out in the woods, their kids will fear them too. And that's, we had this real loss of foraging knowledge here, and I think it was around World War II. There was this sort of mass industrialization of food and canned food and frozen food and all this stuff, and people have lost touch with nature, lost touch with their food systems, and that, I mean, those are bigger issues. But like, we're seeing a resurgence of people being interested in nature, and like you said, your kids have gained skills for a lifetime, and not just the skills to see, identify, and recognize mushrooms, but to then put them in context, to be into nature, to be stewards of nature, to recognize like, hey, I took this thing from the woods, and if I'm not going to take it home and responsibly eat it, I should return it to the woods. And that, I mean, that's incredible lessons to share. Again, this is something like all adults could really benefit from.
It really is amazing. Their perspective compared to mine when I was their age. I mean, I grew up in a family that loved to be outside, and we camped a lot, but just the difference in them when they hear about, wildfires and such, like, they understand it at such a deeper level, like, what's it going to do to the mushrooms? Like, I never would have thought of that as a kid.
Well, I mean, and I'm really curious about like the disturbance effects of wildfire, especially here in Napa, because we've had literally fires every year that I've lived here, and habitats that I've gone and foraged are burnt, and I'm watching things, after the burn, you do get, there's mushrooms that pop up. There's these little purple cup fungi, and little orange fungi. I'm going to actually, this week, I'm trying to post Ascomycetes. So I'm going to post some of those like fire associated ascos. But yeah, I'm curious, as time goes on, how do things recover? How long does it take for the mycelium to come back? And like, you think about things at such a deeper level, other than just like, oh, it's burned, how awful. You're like, oh, this is a natural cycle and part of nature. But again, if we're looking from a human perspective, it seems bad.
It's very scary, because it's a long time before there's a mature tree there. But it's really just, it can be weeks. And then there's mycelium just well, I mean, doing its thing. It's amazing.
Dead matter means mushrooms are there. And so, and sometimes just the fire coming through shifts the species diversity. Like, what comes up is very different, but over time it will reestablish. And that's, you realize that some of these things are natural patterns of nature. And that if you look at the fungal or like the tree perspective and the non-human perspective, you're like, oh, 10 years is not a very long time from, the perspective of a mushroom or a tree that have been around for billions of years. And so for us, 10 years seems like a long time, because we get all saggy and wrinkly and stuff. And not if you eat a lot of mushrooms, so hopefully that'll keep you young. But, it's just interesting, like, shifting perspective and thinking about time in that way. But so one of the things I want to ask you about, because I think you're probably better qualified than almost anybody, because certainly, like, when I started my mushroom journey, I looked up to you and was just like, oh my God, she is
I
like
know, it was really funny. Can I just interject here?
It
was really funny to meet him in the first time, because like, he was like kind of like starstruck. I will just say it's really funny because now, like, I've just, I'm not super like dedicated to social media like, Gordon is. And so now he's surpassed me in the numbers. So I just got to say it's like kind of funny to see the life of, social media circle around, and I appreciate your starstruckness way back when.
Rachel, I'm still starstruck by you, but I'm like, I love that we get to talk and be friends. And like, that's been another thing I want to ask you about too, is like just the Myco community. What I wanted to get at was just like, you do this online education, but you also have done quite a lot of in-person hikes and stuff, which is something that I haven't done, partially because of COVID and partially just because like I don't have that many places to take people. So people always like, take me out, and I'm like, well,
yes, you're so much more limited in California, unfortunately. So yeah, that's actually how it started for me. I started an Instagram page purely for mushrooms. I'd been off of social media for a long time, and I just decided, I have all this mushroom photos. I'm just going to start an Instagram that's just like posting pictures of mushrooms.
My head, the same motivation. I was like, well, I have so many mushroom photos on my phone. What do I do?
And it was very, very small. There weren't very many people. Like I looked for other people who were doing mushroom stuff, and I could only find one other person at that time, which we got to know each other and we're still friends. It's great. But it was because of that, somebody contacted me and asked about doing like a class, and because they ran like a school, like an outdoor type school. And I was like, oh man, doing a class in person, that would be pretty neat. And really, I feel like that's what got me started on the educational side of things. I was already like posting what I was learning, because that's really what it was for me. It was like kind of almost like a diary of like, here, I found this random blue thing. Don't know what it's called. Here it is. But then as I was learning stuff, like I found this mushroom today. It smells really weird. Just anything I was observing and learning, I was already kind of doing that. But as I started to take people out into the woods, it was after the second time that I did that, it was like just a group of 15 people each time, which if you're ever going to teach classes, try not to go over that if you're really like out to forage, because it's like really challenging.
Yeah. Well, and like it's like herding cats too. Everyone is heading in different directions constantly,
people
and
get
you're like,
lost.
all I want to do is stare at the ground, and yet I'm trying to track people more than I'm actually looking at any mushrooms. So
exactly, whistles, and everybody has to have a whistle.
Yeah, I remember that. That's a good hack.
I think you were there at the cabin that one time at Adam's cabin. And everyone was going to go out, and I whip out of my car's giant thing of whistles. Everybody take a whistle with you.
Yep.
Anyhow, so yes.
Thanks, Mom.
It's exactly how I felt. I felt like a mom, but it's okay. So yeah, it was after my second class that I did with folks, taking them out, I was like, wow, this is what I want to do. Like, I want to teach people like how to observe nature, how to look at details. To me, one of my most favorite things is when folks' eyes are just open to like the wonders of the forest floor in a different way, because people are generally food motivated, which is perfectly fine, so they're coming to learn what can they eat. But then when the first time they observe that mushroom that's this big growing out of a pine cone or something, and they're just like in awe, like I love it, and I'm stereotyping here, but when men come to my classes and they're saying cute, adorable, like, oh, I love it,
I mean, I regularly end up squealing like a schoolgirl when I find certain mushrooms. It's like, so yeah, it happens. Definitely.
Oh yes. So taking them out to observe mushrooms in just a different lens, and getting to see people like experience that for the first time, and just the variety. There's so much biodiversity out there that goes unnoticed, and truly it is amazing. Like how for me, I grew up in the Pacific Northwest, which is very it's just like nature's everywhere. It just is. And I mean, I even grew up hunting, which meant I was out in the fall constantly. I didn't pay attention to mushrooms. I had no idea. And it wasn't until there was this moment where I experienced mushrooms, like observing them for the first time. I was like, oh, I wonder how many are out here. I couldn't believe, like now I look back, like, how did I miss all that?
Yeah.
How did I miss so much texture and color, like, and variety? I don't know. It's really incredible. So
Doesn't your
taking
life
people
feel that
out.
much richer for having that in there? Like being able to
Yes.
take off the glasses that blinded you to
Yeah.
mushrooms and suddenly realizing there's a whole world of stuff that you were.
Yes. And so that's what I love. I love having people out and being like, here, hold this in your hand.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes. Whoa. Okay. Yes, I love that so much.
So I guess like in the world of COVID, that's been
Yes.
kind of hard to do as much as you love doing those in-person things.
It was really, yes.
And I guess I wanna get at that because I think that, you know, people might look at our accounts and say, well, you guys have all these followers, you must make all this money off of social media. And like the truth is, you don't, no amount of followers makes you money. Instagram has no way to monetize stuff. YouTube gives you minimal amounts of money kind of thing, but you need like millions of followers to pull in lots of money.
Oh, yes.
And so when you have smaller accounts, people are not making any money. And I know Rachel has in the past relied on doing those forays to be able to support, you know, herself and her kids. And during COVID, it's been really, really tough. And I think people are used to the idea of like, hey, if I'm going to go out with somebody for the day, I'm going to pay them some money to learn from them. But on social media, we have a completely different approach where people are like, I want education for free all the time. And I want like a master class for free every time I go online from world experts. And I want them to tell me everything for free. And how dare they ever put it behind a paywall? And that, you know, that's an attitude I see a lot. And there's a certain kind of entitlement that I feel like comes with the anonymity of the internet, because you're able to just like see somebody and leverage something at them, say, do this, I want this. And you're like, well, I've already done a video on that. You could go watch it instead of just telling me to do the thing you want me to do. Or like, you wanted me to make this like very specific guide for how to hunt mushrooms in like the northeastern part of your state that I've never visited.
Yes.
I'm not sure how to do that.
We tried.
We try, you know, and most mushroom stuff, that's the thing a lot of people don't realize is most mushroom stuff you teach, the general concepts are applicable worldwide. The things you learn about categorizing mushrooms are pretty much the same. The individual species in each place can change. But again, like you and I are not at the species level all the time. We're happy to just be like, it's a bolete, it's a polypore, you know, and those are the sort of general classifications you can learn and draw from all over the place. But I guess I wanted to get at the idea of online education being free, being accessible. And that's something that I love because like I really want to give back to the world and again, help get rid of that film of mycophobia that covers our country and get people interested and passionate and become stewards of nature, just like your kids are going to be. But it's tough sometimes because like, how do we support ourselves in doing that? And, you know, I think, you know, we had a conversations like, you know, in ancient Europe, all the artists and the musicians and stuff had, essentially rich patrons who would pay them to be an artist in residence. And now, you know, very rarely you can apply for something like an artist in residence program where you get like 2 weeks of maybe some solitude and time to work, but it's not like it's not like they pay your bills. They're not like your sugar art daddy, you know.
I mean, it was free to go, but you know, you're not working otherwise.
Exactly. So there's opportunity cost that you're losing by not working or not doing something else. And I guess with that in mind, you and I both have Patreons, which is a way for people that they can subscribe and send like a small amount of money per month. And I know that you and I have talked at length about it being uncomfortable to ask people for money. You know, you're kind of like, you're not just selling what you do, you're selling yourself. You're like, give me money, which feels bizarre, but at the same time, like, it can make a big difference in someone's life, especially for you right now, because you're not able to do those things. So
yes, it is a very interesting dynamic. So we talked about my fundamental series here that I have on Instagram. You'll notice it's not very high quality. You know, it's not like flashy, it's not TikTok-y, and it's not YouTube either. Because I'm doing it like in my bedroom when my kids are asleep. I have no equipment kind of a thing. And so like it's lower quality content when it's like going on something like Instagram, because I want to get the education out there. The education has value no matter how much money I'm making off of it or not, because the value is in the education, right? But sometimes that's why like higher, you know, quality content, more in-depth stuff is going to be like on YouTube. And I haven't had anything on Patreon yet that's Patreon exclusive as far as content. It's always going to be released other places as well. And so it's a very hard balance, because part of me, in my frame of mind, there's this thing is I don't want to make education like only for the elite to have it and be accessible. right? I don't want people to have to pay a ton of money to have access to a video or to a class that I'm teaching in person. But at the same time, like we've mentioned, I'm a single mom with 2 kids. How do you balance that? And how do you express to folks that, like, I love what I'm doing? I am so passionate about this and I want to continue to teach people, but I have to feed my kids.
Yes.
Like,
Yeah.
and it does almost cater to this awkward conversation sometimes. And I don't know what a good balance is. I don't know like how often I need to push those things, because part of it for me too is like I want people to support what I'm doing because they appreciate, the work I'm doing. They love mushrooms. And then also they feel they've gotten to know me enough that they know that I'm going to be using like Patreon support wisely.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And then, so
Yeah,
it's,
you're not using the money to go out and go on lavish trips to the Cayman Islands or something like that. That's you're
no,
buying groceries and gas money and
I am,
clothes for the
yes.
kids and stuff. That's what money gets used for.
It is. And, like sometimes it is, it's really uncomfortable to share, like, like how honest should you be? And I feel like this last year, like I started my Patreon last year because yes, I had actually already planned on 2020 being a year that I was removing some of like the smaller like in-person forays I was doing from my schedule, because
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to reconfigure the way I was teaching to make it more accessible to others, because those classes were expensive and a lot of time I was teaching them through other organizations and they had their own price point on them. So how could, I was just trying to revamp that. And so I was doing things that were more focused on large groups, like going into like schools or colleges and lecturing, doing series like that. So again, COVID hit and I had like this large group thing set up, and it's just like, oh no, that's
Oops.
not
Yeah,
happening.
all done, all gone.
So I'd kind of like set myself up for this whole thing that I thought was going to be successful, and of course was not. So that put me out into a position of like, what, maybe I do need to start a Patreon. And I did, and it's been great. It honestly has helped my family. Like if you follow me on Instagram, I'm pretty honest. Like my kids and I were houseless for a time this last year. We unexpectedly lost housing, and it was a sticky situation, and we went camping for a while, and thankfully that was in the summer, and then just kind of house hopped, and we thankfully just landed in a place a month ago, got into some low income housing. So let me just speak to that. I'm in low income housing. Like I don't want to speak that as a form of shame to myself or to anybody else who is, but this is how we are. Like this is how it is. My YouTube channel has almost 1 million views, on it. And I didn't look up the stats, but I did a few months ago. And I have about 2.5 seasons out on YouTube that have been spanned over about 5 years. And I've maybe made over that 5 years, like $3,000, which I split in half with my brother, who films and edits for me. It's my brother and I, just us two doing it for fun. So
you guys are Yellow Eleanor, as it
we are. But I'm just speaking those numbers to give perspective, because I know I'm not the only creator who has a YouTube channel or who creates stuff like you, like widely popular on TikTok and everything. And like I said, the value is in the education. The value is in the content, whether we get $0 from it or whether we get lots of dollars from it. However,
we don't.
Right, we're not going to be able to keep doing those things unless we find a way to sustain. And there are a lot of people doing mushroom education who have other jobs and everything. But for me personally, a decision I made when I did become a single mom is I wanted to pursue something that I would also have the flexibility to still be a present mother, which meant not having my kids in childcare constantly and working, away from them so much. So I was really trying to make the mushroom thing work. So last year, derailed that just a little bit. But anyhow, that's just to speak to the reality of people like you and I, where people can look at numbers and say follows, see likes, see shares, or whatever, and not realize the thing behind it. And yeah, honestly, like I believe the reality is, for me, I know this is true, and I'm guessing for you as well. The support that we get from others when they share or when they support us on Patreon financially like that, it's just going to be more content and more education and higher quality. It's just natural. It's going to be the natural flow, which is really great.
It just allows you to spend more time focusing on the stuff you want to focus on and not doing other things to try to figure out how to just stay afloat.
Exactly.
Which I think is really important, because again, like the numbers, like we're not making enough off of anything that we're doing to like really make a big difference. So like the support that people offer on a personal level through something like Patreon is really appreciated. It doesn't have to be monetary. There's ways to support content creators that's like just liking their content, commenting, sending it to a friend, sharing it so it gets a little more exposure, so it gets a little bit of a boost. You know, stuff like if you do watch Rachel's videos on YouTube, watch the ad all the way through. I know it's a pain in the butt, but just like start the video, go get a cup of tea, and then come back to watch the video. Especially because you have great long videos, and so people can watch all the way through, and that'll make sure that you actually get at least, you know, fractions of a cent kind of thing for a view.
Yes.
which matters, you know, that stuff does add up. You know, the number you quoted for over 5 years is pretty low if you break that down by like earnings per day kind of thing. So that might seem initially like a lot of money, but if you look at it, like that's almost nothing. It's a drop in the bucket.
Yes,
so
I will say also merchandise.
Yeah,
like
I was gonna say you have an Etsy. We have websites.
Both of us have fun mushroom stuff, and actually what's totally like, I feel like if you believe in like miracle type stuff, I don't know, like, but like just really amazing to me is in 2019 I came up with those Mushmoon shirts. And I happened to have a few left over, and so when 2020 hit, I was like, I need to sell these and sell the rest of these. So I sold the rest of them and made just enough money from the sale of those shirts to buy more and sell those, and then I got more shirts. So now I have like quite a few things, and it's just like really like I feel like there are all these little ways that like the mushroom community kind of pulled through and really helped in the last year, buying a t-shirt or whatever it was. So yeah, and I mean you've got stuff too, like that's a big way. And who doesn't want cool mushroom stuff?
Yeah, seriously. I mean, I think my thing is when I got into mushrooms, I was like, oh, I really want to get some cool, you know, when I was in high school and college, I had shirts that had to do with the stuff I was into. So in college, my friends all complained I had all scuba and beer shirts, and then in grad school it was all, you know, yeast or science things. And then, you know, in my
yeast
current
shirts?
incarnation,
What does a yeast shirt look like?
You don't want to know. No. No. It's just I was like, I want to get some cool mushroom shirts, but every single mushroom shirt that exists is just like Amanita muscaria, and you're like, okay, cool, I've seen that before, and like Amanita muscaria has some stuff associated with it. Necessarily, I don't want to like wear it and have people think that I'm like a psychonaut. You know, I'm just trying to wear a cool mushroom shirt. So I mean, that's what I love about like your designs and the things that I've gotten. You and I both owe big thanks to Lindley.
Oh, yep, I have a Lindley design. Yep. Yeah,
check out Lindley Fonge, amazing artist, and she does some great mushroom-inspired stuff, including my little lobster thing. But yeah, I mean, that's there's so many ways that people can support and help content creators. And again, it doesn't always, you know, Patreon is pretty direct. You're like, you want to send Rachel some money, go subscribe to her Patreon, done, do it. If you don't feel like you can afford X amount of money per month kind of thing, maybe just a one-time thing of buy a shirt, or just like I said, like share the content with your friends and family and watch it. And there's things you can do to help us continue to put out really high quality mushroom education stuff. Cause I know you and I both would like love to be pro for mushrooms. But and we talked about this too, there's not a lot of money in mushrooms. You know, there's nothing wrong with doing sponsorships. I don't think we have done sponsorships because there's nothing one, but it doesn't feel, there's not like a,
authentic relationship in the mushroom world.
Yeah, well, and like, we can't sell makeup kits. You know, there's no one coming. Well, okay, maybe.
Do you name it after different mushrooms?
Could. Okay, well, hey, mushroom company or the makeup companies out there, send her some like mushroom themed makeup. Boom, that's a product right there. Let's hook Rachel up. You'll be the next great makeup influencer.
Oh gosh, no.
Oh yeah, I hope
anybody who knew me in high school would be rolling their eyes. I was like, I don't wear makeup, never wear makeup. But not the case anymore. So
well, funny how we change. But anyhow, I'm just pointing out that like education, you know, this is always something I struggle with because education has intrinsic value.
So much.
Putting that value out there also has value in the people that are making it and doing it, and it's worth. You know, if you feel compelled to support us in whatever way you can, because we really, really appreciate it, and I think that's the bottom line for.
And I will say, I have a new shirt about to come out.
Oh yeah, got a new one
next
about to
week.
drop. Okay, cool.
You got the preview and the sticker version. Don't
Oh
say
yeah. Oh,
anything.
okay.
You know
Okay.
that thing I sent you?
Yeah,
Okay.
I do. It's good. That's another thing. If you subscribe to Rachel's Patreon, you occasionally get a little freebie. Not a bad thing. Not a bad thing. So okay, so we'll stop talking about
Money.
money, because I know no one wants to hear that. Yeah, we're both. One of the things I wanted to ask you about, because it is Women's History Month, and I think
Yes, it
we
is.
might have missed it by a day, but yesterday was International Women's Day.
Hmm.
Or something like that. Either way, this entire month,
You're
I'm
right.
trying to talk to incredible women and feature people who, the voices of women, which are more important than anything I have to say. But I'll say this just in the sense that, like, my entire life, majority of my favorite teachers, doctors, role models, everyone I've ever looked up to that wasn't my dad is pretty much a woman. Even my dad has a lot of feminine energy. He does a lot of gardening and cooking and stuff like that. So if you're on here, Dad, thank you.
Your parents were on last time.
I know they watch a lot of my lives. I haven't seen them comment, so I don't know if they're on here. They might be busy. But one of the things I wanted to bring up was the role of women in oral traditions and foraging and passing on knowledge like that. Stuff like herbalism, and it gets a little woo woo with some of the witchy stuff, but like the fact that women have always been so central in the foraging community as a repository of knowledge and just stewards of the land. Can you speak a little bit about like what your experience has been as a woman educator, as trying to teach the world, and maybe even some of the pushback or challenges that you've had being a woman in that space?
Well, for me, I think I've been fortunate to miss out on some of the pushback for one particular reason. I don't come from academia. So I didn't have to experience and have not experienced necessarily that pushback that kind of comes from those higher educational arenas. And I'm not even self-taught enough to really like mingle in that in a heavy way. So I'm fortunate in that sense that it's like, okay, I kind of fit the traditional role that people have put women in when it comes to the role of mycology. That's something that I have learned about historically. Like you said, there's a lot of oral tradition that's come down, and just the passing of knowledge of women, primarily being the foragers of many things, including mushrooms. And you said witchy woo woo. So I'm going to hit on that just a little bit. And part of that is that one reason it might seem woo-woo, I just love that word, is because there were like just the idea of like falsehoods put around women who were trying to be healers, or like if you think of herbalism, it kind of makes more sense, but you include mushrooms in that, and you include the fungophobia in that, of like the scariness of how much a mushroom could poison somebody, just like certain plants or whatnot. Right. And yes, women who were practicing those things definitely were part of that crowd that, when you think about the witch hunting and the slaughtering that happened, and a lot of knowledge was lost because of that, for sure. And then if you get a little further along, when mycology kind of like becomes a real science, the role that women usually played, not because they're dumb, of course, but because they had no say in the academic world, that they were usually illustrators, or they were people who were out and collecting specimens. They were doing field work. I mean, it's exactly what we're doing today. They're doing field work. And then a lot of things that, if anything, was like named or published, there were women who cultivated relations enough with male mycologists who would publish that work under the man's name. And so there are things that, yes, women contributed, but sometimes it's hard to see what pieces were even there, because they were doing it in that kind of loop around sort of way, which I want to say, oh, that's kind of depressing to think about. But also think about some of those people that, yes, some men, maybe it was because they wanted to get credit, but also some men were like, screw the system, let's figure out a way to get your stuff out to the public because you're making a difference, And So that's kind of a beautiful thing. But really, I mean, mycology is such a young science as it is.
Hmm.
And so there's still a lot of room for women to make a huge impact.
Well,
And
and we have social media, which democratizes the
yes,
whole thing. It's not like you can do citizen science now as a woman or a man and publish
mm-hmm,
almost on your own, or at least be part of
yes,
research collectives where people
mm-hmm,
are being given full credit for what they do. And with
yep,
social media, you have the capacity to sort of self-publish. You know,
yeah.
and you can
And
do
then
stuff
and then
like
people
publish
can
photos of,
review
yeah,
that,
yeah, exactly.
and
You get feedback,
exactly.
and you can do
Mm-hmm.
really high level science because you can do
Yep.
PCR at home now. You can do
Yes, which
microscopy
is
at
so
home. So
cool.
if you really want
Yes.
to do these things, you can get into them. Again,
Mm-hmm.
it's not on me, but there are people out there doing this stuff, and the
Mm-hmm.
bar to enter is so much lower than it used to be. And I think
Mm-hmm.
mycology is one of those fields where, in a lot of fields, if there was someone kind of messing around at home on their tabletop, they'd go, "You're a quack. Get out of here. You're not at like the MIT, Stanford, whatever level." But mycology is like,
Yes.
you're at home messing around on your kitchen table. Great, come
Mm-hmm.
join the club because everyone else is at
Mm-hmm.
home messing around on their kitchen table too. There's not that many academic mycologists, and even they aren't that knowledgeable about the field of mushrooms as a whole. So there are online mushroom educators, citizen
Yep.
science, women like yourself that are
Mm-hmm.
doing absolutely incredible work. And I just
Mm-hmm.
love the fact that social media helps highlight that. And I think,
Yeah.
getting back at that idea of community too is, there's a lot of women out there who are really interested in this stuff and want
Mm-hmm.
to know, but there's a gap of knowledge and there's a gap of
Mm-hmm.
being able to learn from someone that you find relatable and understandable. And
Mm-hmm.
again, that's
That's
Rachel, that
true.
is why I love your content. So
Well, thanks. That reminds me, I did a post probably exactly a year ago on Maggie Rogers. I'll repost that today. So anybody watching on Maggie Rogers, it's good. The one of the blue chanterelles was named after her. So
mm,
pretty
yeah,
good.
that's good stuff. Well, okay, so I want to finish by asking you, I've seen multiple of these go by in the comments, and I generally have been
Hmm.
ignoring the comments because people sometimes say rude things, which is super not cool. And
Yeah.
I didn't want to go into the rude stuff, because I know, you as a woman on YouTube have gotten a lot of rude feedback, and I think that's a thing that we could all do better on in our online community. If you see someone making rude comments, don't make the creator address it. Please help them out. That's another way you can support
Yeah, actually,
creators.
that's a really good point.
If someone's trolling in the comments,
Hmm.
say something to them. Tell them to piss off. Don't bring it on us, because like there's a lot of emotional impact that comes into trying to reply to someone
Hmm.
without being outright rude, without
Hmm.
being dismissive. You can
Hmm.
just block them, but sometimes just blocking someone doesn't help teach a lesson or doesn't help you have an uncomfortable discussion. So
Hmm.
again, you can always support women by just being like, "Hey man, that's really rude. Maybe you shouldn't say that." Or like, just letting people know, give them the
Hmm.
business a little bit. Anyhow,
Reporting,
yeah,
reporting,
report
reporting
the comments.
comments that are derogatory and
Yeah,
explicit is really helpful.
yeah, totally.
Hmm.
So okay, so let's a couple of common questions. I know you might have it too, but I figured I would just like write down a couple. People are always asking me. This is like number one question: how do you tell edible from toxic?
I wrote that down too.
And like, we talked about it. I know we both know an answer to this, but like, yeah, what's your answer to edible versus toxic? What do you think?
So when I see that question, and again, I see a ton of just like, how can I tell which one is poisonous and which one is not? What that says to me is that the person asking the question is so new and fresh to the world of mushrooms that they do need help understanding the context,
Hmm.
because um, if you, I don't know, if just I don't. Oh my gosh, how do you explain this? Um,
Well, I guess
because
I'd say there's no broad overarching thing you can
mhm,
tell people that will help you determine edible from toxic. And it's always
right.
about learning what's in front of you, right? Like,
Yes, and so once that can be explained, it's all of a sudden like, oh, it's not, just to clarify, it's not a dumb question to
no,
ask. Like,
it's
you
not.
want
It's a
to know
reasonable
that.
question, yeah.
You
And
want
with
to
with
know what's
with most other
poisonous.
things in life, you can say, "Oh, leaves of three, let it be." People want that
Exactly.
lesson for mushrooms.
They
You're like, it
do.
doesn't
It
exist.
doesn't exist. And I remember, like, I heard like some vague things like that when I started in mushroom foraging, like some general rules of like, if it has white spores, don't eat it or whatever. But
And you're like,
that's
that's too
that
broad,
it's
too
way
general.
way
Yeah.
too broad and way too general. So really, I mean, the answer to that is you need to get to know every mushroom as an individual. That's
Hmm.
what it comes down to, and that can be really challenging. There's going to be no like, if it's red or if it's white and grows on trees and has blue spores, and I'm just making stuff up. But like, even if it has like a list of 3 characteristics, there is no umbrella or broad sweeping thing that's going to say that one's edible or that one is toxic if it fits these like 5 characteristics, and that's that. It doesn't work. It just doesn't work. It truly is getting to know the individual. So if you're really wanting to eat an edible mushroom, what you need to do is find out like what grows in your area. First off, what is an edible mushroom, and what one maybe doesn't have very many lookalikes.
Right. And that's super important for beginners. Go after the ones that are edible and don't have anything that looks like them, because then you're almost always sure you're finding what you think you're finding.
Yeah. So I mean, that question, it's an insincerity of how can you tell which one's poisonous and which one's not. But at the same time, it shows that, there's a lot to learn here. Again, start with the anatomy of a mushroom, and then you get to know them as an individual, and you can move from there.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a little bit like getting to know people. You can't just broadly generalize on groups of people.
Which one of you is toxic?
and assume things about groups of people. You have to go in and learn, meet the individual, understand the individual, and then you start to realize that like every human is beautiful in their own way for all of their own characteristics, and then that person is, that mushroom is special, and you can feel comfortable about having a relationship with that mushroom because you've gotten to know it really well. And if you were to look at another human or another mushroom, you'd be like, wow, they look totally different because of all these tiny little features that I've learned about them. And you can even, once you become an expert, you can take 2 things that are lookalikes and be like, wow, they look so different.
Like, there's a certain person you always get compared to, and like, oh my gosh, you look identical. But the more you stare at your face, you realize, okay, there's a lot of differences there.
His ears are goofier than mine. You know, he's a little bit more princely. I don't know. Anyhow, so here's another good one. We talked already about like it's not dangerous to touch any mushrooms, which is just that's not even a question. I'm just like, it's not dangerous to touch mushrooms. Period. You're fine. Don't worry about it. The things in mushrooms that are poisonous can't diffuse across your skin, so you're not going to get poisoned from touching. You get poisoned from eating it, but that's not an issue. Better question, I think. Yeah, don't do that. But I think the better question to ask is, where and when do you find mushrooms? And that's a hard question, because I'm like, well, where do you live? You know, and that's it. That is, you want to speak to like the timing and what your process is for trying to find stuff.
Yeah, actually, I get that question a lot. Is how do you find mushrooms, or where do you find mushrooms, or when do you find mushrooms? Like those questions all the time. And again, I live in Washington State. I live in an area that's called the Columbia River Gorge. I'm about 2.5 miles from the coast, but I'm also only about 30 minutes from desert. But I live in a really, really wet pocket. So if I drive 30 minutes one direction or 30 minutes a different direction, the answer is going to be different of when and where.
The habitat changes massively, right?
Absolutely. So if you're really wanting detailed information for where you live, we're not going to be able to give it to you. But here's what we can tell you is that mushrooms depend on cycles and seasons. So moisture and then temperature. So if you think about those 2 factors, so if you do have a very distinct spring versus fall, those are going to be your primary mushroom seasons. However, if you live in an environment where it's kind of like, okay, the summer gets really muggy and wet, that is going to be your mushroom season. So if you look at temperature and moisture, those 2 things really just follow that pattern. And even if within your own bioregion or your own state or wherever you are, there are going to be some areas that like I know I can go to in a 2-hour drive, and I'm going to find chanterelles in June, whereas where I live, in the mountain that I live right next to, I'm not really going to find them until October. So if you get to know areas and which areas like keep that moisture or do certain things, you'll be able to find mushrooms more. But also, just to add on to that, is I remember meeting people and being like, what do? You do mushroom things? Are there really a lot of mushrooms out there? After we have this conversation about mushrooms and what I do for work, I'll get text message and be like, oh my gosh, mushrooms are everywhere. I see them all over. I'm like, yeah, sometimes that's all it takes.
It's just, waking up to it.
Exactly. It's just reframing your sense of curiosity and your observation skills. And then all of a sudden you're going to notice that mushrooms are everywhere. And literally you can go into your backyard. You can walk the streets of Portland. I'm like an hour and a half from Portland, so I use that as a comparison a lot. People will send me pictures of like porcini and morels. in downtown Portland. So, you know, it happens.
Yeah, it really is incredible. And I think like people are always asking me like the rarity of mushrooms, like what's the rarest mushroom you found? I'm like, I don't know. The rarest mushroom I found is probably one I didn't even recognize was rare.
As rare.
Because
Exactly.
it wasn't something that I keyed into. There was this cool like top 10 rare fungi survey this year. And that was cool because it helped people key into stuff. And I think the whole point of that was like, maybe some of the things on this list aren't actually rare. They just haven't been observed because no one's keyed in to look for them, or it hasn't recognized. They're not in habitats that people go mushroom hunting in.
Yeah, projects like that are really neat. That was really fun that they did that. Just to, again, have people on the lookout for something that's not always just edible, but they're, you know, in a sense, in that case, if you're finding it, you're kind of contributing to some of the data and the science, which is neat.
Yeah. And so, I mean, on the coattails of that, people are always asking me, hey, what's your favorite mushroom? And I'm like, oh, that's a really difficult question. Because like, that's a very, again, how do you tell edible from toxic? It's a very reasonable question. Ask somebody who seems like a mushroom expert. But like, as a mushroom person, you're like, I don't know how to answer that question.
Is it my favorite to eat? Is it my favorite to play with? Is it my favorite to smell?
Yeah, to look at, to take photos of, to like, you know, do I get the most Instagram likes on a you know, video of this thing? Or like, or is it just like, for me, mushrooms are they're incredibly seasonal. And so much like seasonal fruit, where I'm like, oh man, I love blueberries, but if like it's fall and I got a really good persimmon, maybe that persimmon is my favorite fruit in that moment, at that
That's
time.
That's a good point.
And it's like, you know, my favorite mushroom is sometimes just what's in my basket. What is there a lot of, you know?
I think that's the Gary Linkoff answer. I think Gary Linkoff's answer to that is whatever mushroom is right in front of me right now, or something along those lines. So it's that same idea. Yeah. Exactly.
It's so much about what's around you, what you're engaged with, what you're excited about in that moment. You know, I think like heading into the fall, I was telling a lot of people like my favorite mushroom is Matsutake. And then after Jerry and I found a lot of Matsutake.
You're like, I'm overwhelmed.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that anymore. There came a point where Jerry's like, put her foot down. I was like, I'm not eating any more Matsutake. And I was like, okay, I'll start giving it away or preserving it. And, you know, she's just like, it's good, but I've had enough for this year. Like, okay, it happens with Chicken of the Woods here too, because we get a lot of that. And so, you know, there's just things like that people see and they're like, oh, it must be so amazing. Like, yeah, I'm over it at this point. I'll wait for next year to like get back into it. But
I'm always, I would say one mushroom I'm still always craving, no matter, like, is the chanterelle, even though like there's so many friends of mine that are like, I was over that after my first season of mushroom hunting. And I don't know if it's something with my palate or like something my body craves necessarily, but seriously, like I'm constantly craving to eat that mushroom. Well, but it still wouldn't be my top favorite. I still can't do that.
See, there you go. I mean, and that's a good thing too. You're like, I love chanterelles, but they might not be my favorite, but they might be one of the ones that I'm most robustly attracted to as an edible, as a visual thing, as just like, it's super satisfying to come home with a big basket of chanterelles in a way that like a big basket of almost any other mushroom doesn't feel quite as exciting. Those are all good things. But we've kind of come up to the end of an hour, and it went by super fast, as it always does when I'm talking to interesting people. But I want to say thank you so much for coming on with me, and I want everyone to be sure to go check out Yellow Eleanor here on Instagram, on YouTube. Check out Rachel's website. If you want to support Rachel, you can go subscribe to her Patreon. That is much appreciated. She's got an Etsy with some really cool like original mushroom designs, and you know, I think the internet and the myco community at large owes Rachel a huge debt of gratitude for doing what she has done online for so long, and also just thank you for being like a phenomenal, awesome person, and just being a wonderful educator and a myco mom to us all.
So. A myco mom to all. There you go. Thank you. I appreciate that. Also, if anybody doesn't know, Gordon has a frequently asked questions section on his website. So if you want, you know, some of your beginner questions, he does have a section that answers.
Yeah, I have tried, you know, very hard to try to answer most of the questions that people fling at me on a regular basis. And just go check my website. So anyhow, thanks again. I hope that in the not too distant future that we get to like go out and explore the world again together. Maybe do a class or do something.
I want to go down your way.
Please. I mean, I think this spring season, if you've got time, I don't know how, like, we need a little more rain. But I'm hoping there'll be good things happening in like May, June up in the mountains and stuff like that. So that's a good halfway point too between Oregon or you're in Washington. But yeah, it'd be a lot of driving either way. But either way, it's doable. It's doable. Cool. Rachel, pleasure as always. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye.